Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. The sister of a fallen Northwest Territories firefighter says the coroner's recommendations about his death are good, but they come too late for her brother. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink explains.
25-year-old Adam Yeadon died while fighting a fire near his home of Fort Liard last summer. A year later, his sister is still struggling with the sudden loss.
I can't even have any pictures of him up because I cry all the time. It's not, I just don't want this for any other family.
And for that reason, Denua says the recommendations issued last week are a good thing.
The recommendations are all good for the future firefighters, but I just feel like it just all came too late.
The NWT Coroner Service is not allowed to lay blame for what happened, but it did issue recommendations in hopes that something like it would never happen again. It suggested that the Department of Environment and Climate Change train more firefighters about dangerous trees, get a new type of more protective helmet, and to develop a manual of firefighting gear that firefighters use.
I think this is a learning opportunity for not only the government of the Northwest Territories, but I think also for the firefighters themselves. We're looking and seeing more intense forest fires, more forest fires, and the conditions on the ground that they're working in are way different than even 5-10 years ago. So they need to update their stuff.
The Department of Environment and Climate Change says it's accepting the recommendations. It says some of them are already part of the territory's fire programs.
This incident has impacted every facet of our fire operations, and we're committed to charting a path forward towards constant improvement in our safety culture and implementing the recommendations going forward.
Westwick says the department was already working on rolling out a more intensive type of dangerous tree training. He says that all firefighter crew leaders have now taken that new training. As for any recommendations that aren't already in place, he says the department is working on it. Leanie Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Days after a big snow dump in Whitehorse, there's frustration about snow clearing, or lack thereof. Cheryl Kawaja hit the streets to find out more.
3 and 4 days after the snow dump, even with big tires, it's hard for Daryl Tate to push his wheelchair through the sloppy snow.
Fighting with accessible parking spaces and having everything cleared out. We approached City Council last term or whatever, and try to make some motions to get things moving forward, and nothing ever got solidified.
Tate isn't the only one struggling through the snow.
Like, I'm trying to walk across the street, I'm falling all over the place, tripping in ruts. I can't use my legs very well. I'm just like,
oh. What do you want to see done?
Done.
What do you want
I'm
to see
done.
Done?
I want to see Main Street plowed.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah, it's been 15 years, at least on my end, of every winter. It's the same thing over and over.
Newly elected councillor Eileen Melnichuk happens by. She says snow clearing and accessibility are on her radar.
And while I was campaigning, I had a lot of people ask, and it's a priority for me to look at how do we clear snow.
And while Tate waits for the city to figure that out, he says he isn't holding his breath.
It's just we have to re-educate, do everything, all that hard work that we did all over again. And I'm just getting tired. I don't know if I have the fight in me to do it this year. I just laugh when I come out here because I just got to accept it's going to be a hard season.
Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
As of this evening, Main Street in Whitehorse has been cleared, but many streets remain messy. A spokesperson for the city of Whitehorse says it's working at improving snow and clearing and enforcement. They say it has hired more staff for enforcement, and about 40 tickets related to snow were issued over the last few days to businesses and property owners. The president of Nunu Incorporated will not seek re-election. Aluki Kutiak made the announcement this afternoon at the organization's annual general meeting in Iqaluit. She was first elected in 2016 after winning against the incumbent, Kathy Tautungi. Kutiaks was one of the signatories to the devolution agreement, along with the Premier of Nunavut and the Prime Minister. The nomination period for declaring candidacy in the election runs from October 28th until November 1st. Municipal elections were held in a number of NWT communities yesterday, and in Fort Smith, Fort Simpson, and Inuvik, incumbent mayors lost their seats. In Fort Smith, Dana Ferguson will take over as mayor from Fred Daniels, while Les Wright beat out longtime mayor and councillor Sean Welly in Fort Simpson. Welly has served 12 years as mayor and 4 on council. In Inuvik, former Mayor Peter Clarkson is back in, having beat incumbent Clarence Wood by almost 300 votes. 2 mayors will keep their jobs after yesterday's vote. Frank Pope remains mayor and Norman Wells beating former Territorial Cabinet Minister Polly China. And in Hay River, Candace Jameson also keeps her seat. She ran unopposed. The Northwest Territories Minister of Finance has tabled the capital budget for the next fiscal year. It lays out $339 million of proposed spending, but some MLAs want to know why only 3% is dedicated to housing. Natalie Pressman reports.
It's a familiar tune in NWT budget discussions, not enough money for housing.
Year after year during capital budget deliberations in this House, MLAs stand up and say we are not spending enough money on public housing.
Have a look through past Hansard transcripts, and year after year, you'll find speeches by MLAs complaining that the capital budget has failed to adequately allocate resources to the Assembly's priorities.
Housing is one of 4 priorities set by this Assembly. MLAs intentionally chose just 4 to be able to make real progress. So why is there just $11.3 million allocated to housing out of a total of more than $339 million? MLAs noted that this has happened before, that budgets don't allocate enough money to people's biggest concerns that MLAs have agreed upon. So what's happening? Julian Morse says the issue is in the process.
What appears to be missing from our process is a more foundational conversation prior to budget development and across departments about the direction set out in the mandate and how that direction might impact not only our capital spending, but even our organizational structure.
Morse said conversations around the budget should always tie into the Assembly's priorities, like housing. MLAs agreed to continue discussions on the issue. The capital estimates gives the biggest pot of money to highways and roads. Some of the projected spending is for upgrades to 5 of the territory's highways, including the Dempster Highway and the Inuvik-Tuktoyaktuk Highway. It also allocates spending for planning and design for the Mackenzie Valley Highway and an environmental assessment for the Slave Geological Province Corridor. MLAs will be discussing the proposed capital budget in the coming days. Afterwards, they'll vote on whether to pass it or change it. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
As NWT MLAs consider the capital budget, they're doing it knowing that the territory is reaching its debt limit. The finance minister has told Ottawa that limit needs to be raised. Yellowknife MLA Robert Hawkins has expressed concerns that Northerners will be left on the hook with more debt if it's increased. But one economist says it's not that big a deal, especially when it's for capital expenses that benefit the territory.
A debt ceiling is set in just nominal dollars. So the 1.8 billion that is currently the ceiling now, at some point would need to be increased, just as the limit has been increased about a half dozen times in the past 2 decades. So I think we should be less concerned about the debt limit itself being increased, but we should think more about the overall amount of debt that the government of NWT has and the burden of that debt and how much of the budget, for example, is taken up by interest payments. And when you look at those measures, the debt situation in GNWT is actually really quite strong, especially compared to provinces. The overall amount of debt that we see in the the territory, relative to the government's overall revenue, it's less than what you see in Alberta, which is by far the lowest debt provincial jurisdiction in the country. And only about 1 to 2% of GNWT revenues are needed to cover interest on the debt. And that's a lot less than the roughly 6% that you see for provinces as a whole. Well, borrowing for capital is normal. Capital is long-lived. So unlike operations, where it's the year-to-year spending on salaries and whatever else, capital can use debt to shift some of the costs into the future, because the benefits of the infrastructure also occurs in the future. So as long as you're tying debt finance to capital investments that actually will generate a return, like actually create benefits, not wasteful infrastructure, then appropriately structured debt instruments can be an entirely appropriate way to fund that.
NWT Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak says discussions with Ottawa about raising the debt ceiling haven't happened yet, so she can't say exactly how much more money could be added. Toombs says the last 2 times the limit was raised, in 2020 and 2015, the total borrowing limit went up by $500 million each time. Staying with NWT infrastructure, materials to fix the NWT's Decho Bridge are en route. That is according to the territory's infrastructure minister. The bridge crosses the Mackenzie River near Fort Providence. A broken cable discovered in August 2023 forced the territory to reduce traffic on the bridge to 1 lane. Today, the MLA for the Decho region asked what happened.
What caused the damage to the Decho Bridge? Thank you.
Back in August of 2023, it was noticed that there appeared to be a broken cable on this particular bridge. They had engineers on site within 48 hours, and they were able to identify fairly early on that what they thought was happening was in fact a metallurgical problem, a problem with the materials themselves. So they took the materials out, they pulled the cable off the bridge, took it for testing, wanted of course to make sure that they knew for sure what had gone wrong, and it was confirmed that there was no defect in the design or the engineering or the construction. There was something wrong in the metal that was actually used to cast this particular piece. And so as a result of that, not only did they fix that one, Mr. Speaker, but they fixed all 24 bars, just to be sure, since they were all cast from the same bit of metal. Thank you.
Why is the repair to the bridge taking so long at this point? Thank you.
What they've done is gone back to the original constructor of the bridge, rather than try to find someone new to fit themselves in. They've gone back to them to recast these pieces again. They had to, in fact, to recast the entire 24 bars. So that's now been done. It's been happening by this other company. At the same time, infrastructure did go out. We've simultaneously procured the part of getting it built back in. And so with that, they've actually, by doing it that way, they're able to speed up the overall process of getting folks on site. There was a bit of a delay in terms of getting the material or the bridge components shipped here. I am told that they are due here, they're en route, they're due here in early November. And the best I can say is in terms of a delay, I think early on, Mr. Speaker, people were saying an estimate of having it rebuilt this fall. Fall, of course, can be September, but really, there's only been a slight delay in that delivery. And so I'm happy to say that they're en route, they're expected to be here in November.
Wozniak says if the materials do arrive on schedule in early November, people should be able to fully use the bridge within this calendar year. She says the estimated cost for these repairs is around $7 million. The Decho Bridge opened in 2012. It cost $202 million. Now to the Yukon Legislative Assembly, where both opposition parties say privatization has no place in healthcare. That's after the Yukon government issued a request for proposals to build hospital infrastructure. In it, the Liberal government says it would consider public-private models. They say it's to allow room for partnerships with First Nations development corporations. But the Yukon Party says the Liberals have failed to expand health infrastructure during their 8 years in office.
For the past 8 years, the Liberal government has ignored Yukon Hospital's plea for more money. Even an independent report by Ernst & Young confirmed years of chronic underfunding of our hospitals under this Liberal government. Then yesterday, we learned the Premier's solution to this will be a P3 model to privatize Yukon hospitals. Why is the Liberal government even considering privatizing all or parts of Yukon hospitals?
say privatization of healthcare services is not in the cards, but the territory's health minister says public-private partnerships could be used for construction.
What would be a mistake is to not consider every possible option to provide the best possible service to Yukoners. Since 2018-19, we have increased the Yukon Hospital Corporation's O&M funding from $68.2 million to $120.8 million, which represents an overall increase of 77.2%.
McPhee also says the Yukon government is obligated to work with Indigenous governments under the Umbrella Final Agreement. Voters in New Brunswick have chosen change and made history in the process. Liberal leader Susan Holt will be the first female premier of that province.
Thank you to everyone who voted, and a special thank you to everyone who voted for Team Holt and our amazing candidates that we elected tonight.
Holt and her Liberals won a majority in the election. They swept to power with 31 of the province's 49 seats. Progressive Conservative leader Blaine Higgs lost his seat in the election and offered congratulations to Holt in his concession speech.
This is a proposed corridor for multiple pipeline projects.
You're crossing our territory on two ends of your pipeline. Who gave you permission?
Pipelines break of the pipelines would destroy the water and everything in it.
They got to come through us first.
This is an immediate evacuation order for all Coastal GasLink employees. I feel like we are at war. It's just all been building up to this point.
Yenta on the Passionate Eye. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Release him. Why? Well, I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
This man is actually in my custody.
What did he do?
Well,
Did you hear that? I'm being charged with,
This ranch isn't going down. Not on my watch.
The dirty underbelly of capitalism is exploitation.
They're making more money than they have ever made in the history of the music business.
We have generation after generation of us not seeing a fair piece of the pie.
How do we keep the money from Black music in Black people's hands?
Never got paid, never got their due, never got their acknowledgement, never got their awards, never got their flowers.
Don't miss Paid in Full, a 3-part series. Watch free on CBC Gem.
If the car comes with the deal, I'm in.
Cheers, Dragons!
I look forward to fighting you on many a deal.
And we look forward to meeting you.
Dragon's Den. Watch free on CBC Gem.
The question is,
and I'm just going to ask, I want to ask you, but
why is this such a big deal? What does the science say?
What was their reaction?
What are we talking about here?
Who told you?
So, to be clear, what is the actual story there?
I think we can explain.
Optimism for a winter ice bridge is in the air in Dawson City. That is because ice has started flowing down from the Klondike into the Yukon River. Last winter, the Yukon River didn't fully freeze over, and that left residents using an unofficial 5-kilometer trail to cross the river. A hydrologist with Yukon University says it's still too early to say whether the Yukon River will freeze over, but he says it's looking good.
I would say just based on the information that I have from current water levels, it looks definitely more promising for a full ice cover at Dawson this fall than it looked last year.
Turcotte says a cold snap with temperatures around -20 would help freeze the river. He says freeze up for the Yukon River at Dawson City usually happens around mid-November. An Inuit-owned clean energy developer is reviving plans for hydro energy in Iqaluit. These are pictures of the Kugaluk or Makind River, 60 kilometers northeast of Iqaluit. Nunavut Nukiksautit Corporation, or NNC, has chosen this as a possible site for a hydro project. The company says it's away from where most people use the land, but it is still looking at any other adverse impacts. If all goes well, the corporation is optimistic the project could replace diesel in the city.
In Nuke, for instance, there's a hydro facility there that is their prime power, but they do still have a diesel plant as backup in case there's any issues with the hydro facility. But majority speaking, they're using the hydro facility, the power that's generated at the hydro facility, as their prime power. So I think something similar could be done here.
The Nunu government paused its hydro plans in 2014 due to a lack of money. But NNC believes it can overcome that barrier. That's because it can borrow more than a government agency. NNC estimates its project, if successful, will cost up to $500 million. 10 years ago today, a gunman opened fire at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Ottawa and killed Corporal Nathan Cirillo. He then walked into Parliament, where he was shot and killed by security guards. Today, people remembered a soldier who died and the day that changed Parliament forever. Matthew Kupfer reports.
The National War Memorial is a site of solemn and sacred reflection. For some, it has even more personal meaning. They were here 10 years ago, on the morning Corporal Nathan Cirillo was shot. They were the first to help. Martin Magnan still remembers hearing the gunshots. Magnan was part of the group that went toward the sound to help Cirillo.
I did first aid. I was under his legs. That was my duty that day, and I held his hand, and we just talked to each other and worked through those precious moments.
In the following days, months, and years, the group would be recognized for their bravery, acting in a time when it wasn't known if there could be more than one shooter or if the one they saw could come back.
You know, now we're a team. We call ourselves Team Nathan.
Margaret Leary keeps a photo of Team Nathan on her desk, along with a clock and bracelet she was given by the Cirillo family. She says their grief is what affected her most.
How that's translated is, you know, just live your life with purpose. You know, find meaning, do those things that you can to help others.
The former nurse says she decided to retire after the attack and for the better part of the last decade volunteered with Médecins Sans Frontières. She hopes as people reflect on this anniversary, they think about how they can help in their own way.
Everybody stepped forward, a group that were all off in different directions, all stepped forward. So that's my hope, is that the next time that someone's down or needs help, that a bystander tries and helps out in any way they can. That's humanity. That's what we should be there for each other.
Magnan has faced struggles with his mental health, aftershocks he didn't realize for years after the event. He says cold autumn air brings a rush of memories. Even then, he would regularly visit the monument that figures so prominently in his life. As he navigates his path to healing, he says it has made him more understanding of others.
J'espère que le moment m'a fait une meilleure personne maintenant.
Then paramedic chief Anthony DeMonte was at City Hall when he overheard the call come in. He rushed to the scene.
When I arrived, there were citizens already attempting to care for Corporal Cirillo.
I've often seen Canadians, whenever somebody is in distress, there's always somebody in the crowd that comes and helps.
DeMonte says especially on this anniversary, his thoughts turn to the Cirillo family.
I find it so tragic, and for both the family and his friends, how difficult that must be. And, you know, 10th anniversary, I mean, every year, I'm sure, and every day they get up, they must remember him. But certainly on the 10th anniversary, they're reflecting on this.
Matthew Kupfer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Businesses across Canada are now adjusting to Ottawa's changes to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. The program has shifted direction several times following a post-pandemic surge in the hiring of workers from abroad. Investigative reporter Shayna Luck looks at how Canadian Tire employees who came in as part of that program have quit because of working conditions and pay.
Two former employees of an Etobicoke Canadian Tire are speaking out about their experiences on closed work permits. The temporary foreign workers say they left a workplace they felt was unhealthy and didn't abide by the contracts they signed coming to Canada. The store on the west side of Toronto was approved to hire 34 foreign workers starting in 2022, but many left before their work permits expired. The two workers who spoke to CBC said the store owner paid them less than the agreed upon wage in their contracts. The workers said they couldn't adequately support their families on the wages they received. One worker said he felt reluctant to leave because of the closed work permit tying him to that store. He believes closed permits can lead to exploitation.
Work permit it's like a cage, you know, even though you can choose kind of jobs that make you comfortable. This work permit, they use this to exploit you, to do what they want to you.
According to one expert who studied the program, that's a common feeling among temporary foreign workers.
I would say one of the worst aspects of the temporary foreign worker program is the closed work permit. And it literally does trap the worker. It ties them to the workplace. And so people endure considerable mistreatment, hoping, okay, maybe things work out, but partly because they just can't leave.
This comes at a moment when the Canadian government is making major adjustments to the temporary foreign worker program. In the last 5 years, the number of workers who've moved from closed to open permits because of abuse has gone up dramatically. The owner of the Etobicoke Canadian Tire, Izil Natarajan, said he vehemently denies all the allegations against him. Canadian Tire Corporation said in an email it's deeply concerned and investigating the details and validity of the allegations. It also said all stores make independent hiring decisions. The province of Ontario has an open investigation into the store. The federal government wouldn't confirm whether it does too. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
Halloween decorations seem to get larger every year. I've certainly seen some impressive installations around Yellowknife. And it's all fine, as long as they don't get away from you. Jesus. Police in Bay Village, Ohio were called to the scene of this fugitive pumpkin. It had broken free and rolled onto a busy road. That inflatable giant weighs 350 pounds. Police say it was returned to its owner without incident and that, quote, no officers or pumpkins were harmed during the operation. Thank goodness for that. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Make sure all of your Halloween decorations are really put down. Sorry. Thanks for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
You're going to be introduced to a new world. Stand back.
I think my dislike is warranted.
What was Amy calling it? The beef wars?
You don't tell me anything. You don't share your feelings, open up about your past.
It's not that simple, Amy.